Okay, Pirkei Chamishi, Pirkei Avos. Ba'asar ma'amoros nivra olam. The world was created with 10 utterances of Hashem. Now, what is the value of knowing, having that piece of information? Whether it was 10, whether it was 1, what's the value? Lo b'mamar echad yochel iboros. Hashem could have created all existence with 1 utterance. Just say whatever existence has to be, let it be. As Hashem had said on the first day, ye or, and the second day, he said what he said. At one moment, he could have said all existence should happen in 1 moment. So if that's the case, why did he create it with 10 utterances? Eli poram and rishoim. So the rishon, the evil, should be held accountable, culpable. Because they destroy through their transgressions and their defiance, they destroy the world that was created with 10 mamoros. Litin sochatov latzadikim, and to give good reward to the tzadikim. Shemakayim sa'olam sheniver basar mamoros, because they uphold the world, they maintain the world that was created with 10 utterances. First, I want to just address socha tov, to give socha tov to tzadikim. I mean, sochar, reward, isn't reward. If you're deserving reward, is it tov? We understand it's tov. A person works and he receives a significant amount of money for a salary. It's a good wage. So why isn't sochar synonymous with tov? Evidently, the sochar, we say in the Shemon Esrei, Gomel chasodim tovim. He's Gomel chasodim tovim. He's Gomel chasodim. He does acts of kindness. What is the chasidim tovim? You have certain things that, what happens if a person comes upon success, and the success is the basis for his downfall, ultimately? Touches things within him, he becomes pompous, arrogant. The opportunity that brought him to that, the success that brought him to, is that good or bad? Had terrible consequences. Anytime Hashem gives socha tov to the tzaddikim, it's socha tov. There's no downside to that reward. Socha tov l'tzaddikim. Gomel chasodim tovim. We say in the Amidah, God is gomel, he provides chasodim tovim. Tovim means they're innately good. There's no negative downside to it. I'll give you an example. Extreme example. Person wants to take out a client, and by wining and dining him, he's going to be able to sell one product. The product is overvalued. The product is deficient. It's about to become obsolete. And he wants him to buy out this inventory, which seems to be for a song, but it's worth less than the song. It's totally off. The tune doesn't play right, but the person doesn't know it. So the person believes he's receiving something. He's taking him out to dinner, one of a kind of restaurant. But what is he ultimately selling him? That is a means to bring him down. When Hashem gives sochar, gives reward, it's sochar tov, the tzaddikim. But why is it sochar tov, the tzaddikim? The tzaddik has assured the world to come, because that is the essential reward for a mitzvos. We say schar b'ayam al. There's no reward in this world because the innate value of a mitzvah, there's not sufficient reward in this world or time in this world that you're able to actually compensate a person for the good deed that he had done. Whenever we say Ochel Pirkei Mazer, Pirkei Abo, the Mishnah tells us we sit every morning by Birchas Torah. Ochel Pirkei, we have the Pirkei, the use of fruit in this world, but the principle is intact in the world to come. So the commentators explained, life is not simple. When you have difficulty making ends meet, life is much more challenging. the certain mitzvos which make a person worthy, it causes that his material is more available to make things life easier. Like we have later in the Mishnah, it says, the person who learns Torah mitoch oni, despite his impoverished state, ultimately he's going to study Torah mitoch osher. Hashem will provide wealth because you proved yourself, even though you didn't have the means, and despite that, you met the challenge. So now Hashem is going to make it easier for you. So when Hashem gives the tzaddik the extra, it's only to make life easier. He shouldn't have to have the struggle that he has where he has less. So the tzaddik, everything gives the tzaddik socha tov. The world to come, there's no question of socha tov. That's innately the ultimate in goodness. But even when the tzaddik gets in this world, that's perasebo mazeh. He gets the usufruct in this world. That's only so the challenge should be as difficult. There's a famous word from Yisrael Salanter. When we receive reward in this world, are we really sure what it's all about? The Gemara tells a story in Tainus that there was a certain Tana, he had very difficult times, very difficult. He prayed to Hashem, he should better his situation financially. And out of heaven, a hand extended itself with a gold leg. So he goes and he sells the leg and he brings his wife home, all kinds of foods that they never ate before. Meat and wine and delicacies. He never says, why? So where did this come from? He says, well, I prayed to Hashem that our life became untenable because how difficult it was financially. And the hand extended itself from Shemayim, from heaven, with a gold leg. So I sold the leg, and that's what this is from, and have plenty left that we can live a life of ease. No more this untenable situation. His wife says, I hear. That night, his wife has a dream. And she dreams that all the couples in the world to come in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden, in the soul world, the wife is sitting with the husband at a table, and all the tables have all the legs holding up the table. That table has a leg missing. So she understood immediately that gold leg that was given to them, that is a reduction of their share in the world to come. She says to her husband, I'm not interested in any of this. You take that leg, give it back. I don't want it. Because what is socha tov? What is the real reward? The world to come. For the world to come, I'm going to sit on a two-legged table rather than three. So the table's not secure. I have no interest. So the Gemara tells us he repurchased the leg, and he prayed that Hashem should take the leg back. The same hand that extended itself from Shemayim, who gave the leg, retracted it, took the leg back. So Gemara says the second miracle was a bigger miracle than the first miracle. To give is easy. That Hashem should take it back, that was a tremendous miracle. Because usually Hashem gives it, he doesn't take it back. Because once it expends itself in this world, it doesn't go back into the spiritual world. But because of this person's merit, his schus, he took it back. So what's socha tov? Socha tov means there's no downside. The reward is not a reduction of your share in the world to come. But if it is a reduction, you're exchanging eternity for a moment, literally. So it's socha tov. There's no downside. So Rav Kalatsky says, so when a person, things get better financially in this world, how do you know whether it's a reduction, it's a payout, or it's the usufruct to make life easier? The answer is you never know. So what you have to do is, whatever addition that Hashem gives you, you have to reinvest it. Reinvest it in spirituality. Use it l'shem shamayim. As a result of that, even if it was a reduction, since you're putting it back, so-called, in the enterprise, which is olam ha'lo, therefore you're always in a safe location. You're not taking a chance. But it also say, I always want to go on a vacation. We're going to go on a cruise for whatever it is. We'll go on to a location, I don't even speak the language. I need an interpreter. Now I'm going to Italy, never know. Do you know what that costs you? That vacation. You never know what it costs you. That you have that may be a reduction of your share in the world to come. So if you go there to do a Kiddush Hashem, or to come back and tell people not to go there because it was just a waste of time, that's a mitzvah. So my going is to keep people away from there, okay? A lot to be read between the lines, what I'm saying right now. Differences, they uphold the world. They uphold the world, which Ted Maimoros. Now, there's a famous question which the Maharal of Prague asks. It says, Hashem could have created the world with one utterance. Why did he create it with 10 utterances? So the Rishonim should be culpably held accountable. Because they destroyed the world that was kept. They tried to undermine a world that was created with a greater degree of Hashem's involvement. 10 utterances. I mean, Hashem created the world with more utterances. So the Russia should be more culpable. I mean, Hashem always wants to do the best for everyone. You mean, it's like he set up the Russia. Yeah, if you be culpable, let it be culpable to the nth degree. So Maharal said something beautiful. He says, the Maharal of Prague, let's say he would have, very often a person says, I didn't know any better. There wasn't enough in the script to be able to understand the value of it. So the world you created, it was just totally, it was like finding a needle in a haystack. You have to be at a special level to even understand what the world is all about. So the Maharal of Prague says, if you have a single number as a unit, once you come to 10, each number is individual. When you come to 10, 10 is made of what? Of 10 ones. But 10 ones, each one contributes to a unit called 10. Right? You have 1, then you have 10. So even though 1, it's made up of ones, but when you have 10, it creates a totality called a unit. If Hashem would have created the world with one utterance, you can't, it's very difficult to figure out. It's impossible to figure it out. But if you have 10, what does 10 mean? 10 utterance means that each utterance complemented another utterance, and in totality, it created a unit of 10. So if you look at the world, and you see the world, every aspect of the world complements another aspect of the world. So it's clear, it's not random. 1, you could say it's random. But if 10 and everything fits perfectly, then each one facilitates the other and complements the other, don't you see that the world has a purpose? That there's a creator? Of course, there's a structure. 1, there's no structure. How am I supposed to figure it out? But 10, you can figure it out. Of course, and that's why he did it with 10 utterances. So the Russia should see it, and if he chooses to turn his back, he's going to be held accountable. With 1, there's no accountability. You can't fault him because he doesn't understand. But since 10, it's clear blatantly, it's irrefutable that everything is a contributing factor to something else. How do you not read the script? The answer is, you have no interest. If you have no interest, then you pay the price. So now there's a basis for the culpability of the Russia and the tzaddik, because he sees it. It's obvious. It's obvious. It's Hashem's world. He's the creator. What does David say? David says, we say it every morning by Shabbos. How wondrous are your actions? They were all done with a level of wisdom, which it's not fathomable, that level of genius. We had mentioned a while back a medrash that Yaakov, when he was on Har Moriah, he had taken 10 stones, and the 10 stones were fused into one. And that was an indication, a confirmation, that he was going to be the father of the 12 tribes. Because the tribes, although each tribe is unique, has its own characteristic, but together it creates the Klal Yisrael. Each one is an essential part of Klal Yisrael. In totality, that's the Jewish people. Now, and what is the purpose of existence? as it says, Bereshis Bara Elokim, for the sake of Bereshis Hashem created the world, for the sake of Torah, for the sake of Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people. Now, what is the profile of the Jewish people? 12. 12 stones become one. So the Medrash says, what do you have 12 hours in the day and 12 hours at night? To confirm and indicate, to understand what the objective and the value of creation is. What do you have 12 months in a year? Again, wherever you turn, you see the number 12. What do you have 10 parts of the zodiac? Again, 12. Wherever you turn, there's 12. So it's the same, it's like Asar Maimoros. What's all this 12? Repetitively, 12. 10. 10 is a unit. A unit means it's made up of single components which comprise the totality. They complement one another. So if that's the case, it's clear. This is not random. Didn't come about by itself. I once said to a person, first I would speak about the professed atheist. I said to him, if I show you a skyscraper and it's built where it'll win the prize for in architecture, and every room is furnished with the most updated technology, are you going to tell me it happened by itself? You're not going to say it happened by itself. If you did, you say, there's something wrong with you. Where are you coming from? If you have a world that the world itself, every part of the world complements the other part of the world. And the more you understand the world, the more you understand it's beyond your comprehension, the genius or the human body, how the chemistry of the body and the internal organs, the brain, how everything works in conjunction with one another. It's not to be believed. You can say this is random. It evolved from the one cell animal, from the amoeba. That's how it came. The whole infrastructure of the body, the way it is, it's clear. It didn't happen by itself. The 10, a Maimoros clear means it's a unit. It's a unit made up of individual ones. So what is a unit? It goes in conjunction, it creates the unit. The world, in conjunction with everything else, creates one entity called a functioning world. But it's clear it was by design. And it was by design. Who is the so-called the designer? Hashem is the designer. That's ma rabu ma'asech kulam b'chochma b'ziso. How wondrous are your actions? They're not fathomable. They were done with wisdom, which is divine wisdom. We find that Yosef was in a dungeon for 12 years. After 12 years, the wine steward shares with Paro because he had a dream which he couldn't find any interpretation of the dream. And finally, the wine steward pipes up and says, there's this foreigner, this unstable person in prison with us, doesn't even speak our language. He has the ability to interpret dreams. He comes out, he immediately interprets the dream, and he gives, within the dream, he gives a solution, how to deal with the famine. First, there's going to be a plenty, there's going to be a famine, and how you're going to secure the world, how you can secure Egypt, that it shouldn't perish in the famine, and how you have to store it away, how you have to appoint an overseer. So what is Paro? Paro was the monarch of the most advanced civilization. What did he say to his internal group? Have you ever seen a person where the wisdom of God is within him? This is not genius. This is not human genius. This is divine genius. He reckoned this is divine. If you see and understand the world, it's genius, but it goes beyond human genius. So the Russia, how do you not recognize it? It's interesting. Many years ago, Rav Shvadron, Zech Tzadik Lebrocha, he was known as the Magen of Yerushalayim. And I heard him many years ago in Baltimore. He came to speak. And must have been about 55 years ago. And he spoke, this part of it, what he spoke about was in Hebrew. And he says this person goes into a restaurant, very exclusive restaurant, and he orders the most expensive dish. on the menu a platter of fish, the most expensive platter of fish, and the waiter, it was such an expensive platter, they called over the maitre d' and said, by the way, this is a client, this patron, we got to really take care of him because he's ordering things nobody usually orders. It's on the menu. And the maitre d' says, Mr. So-and-so, why are you ordering this very ornate, very expensive dish? He says, because I love fish. I love fish. They bring him this platter of fish. It's a sight to be seen, the way it was garnished, the way it was prepared, with the fish and with the vegetables, everything else. And immediately he takes the cutlery and he starts mutilating the fish. So the maitre d' says to him, Mr. So-and-so, I thought the reason why you ordered because you love fish. He says, it's not you love fish, you love yourself, and therefore you're devouring the fish, you're mutilating the fish. The same idea. A Russia, he doesn't see the forest from the trees. When he's here, it's obvious. There's nothing superfluous in this world. Everything complements everything else. But what does he see? He says, what could I take? That's all he sees. He sees himself. I have 100, I want 200. I have 1,000, I want 2,000. The more I have, the gap gets wider. Why? Because all he sees is what he doesn't have. Rather than see what he has, which is the focus, then he'd see it correctly. But since he doesn't see it that way, he only sees himself, and he has this insatiable, unending need for whatever it is, because that's all him. Therefore, Hashem made it obvious to you. Why did he create the world with 10 utterances? To let you know the secret. So why don't you understand it? The answer is because you have no interest. Because your interest is yourself. As a result of that, there's liability. But the tzaddikim, on the other hand, where their interest is doing the will of Hashem, so it's obvious. This is unbelievable. Hashem created a world where everything fits perfectly. Exactly. Everything has its place. So it's obvious. There's a master, there's a creator. So therefore, it's litin schar l'tzaddikim, litin socha tov l'tzaddikim. Of course, they recognize it's the maker, it's the creator. Therefore, it's not just reward, it's socha tov. There's nothing negative about this reward. It's eternity. That's what he merits. And even if he has material, that's only to facilitate the spirituality. His name was Rav Kahneman. He was a Kohen. His name was Rav Yosef Shlomo Kahneman. And there was a community in Lithuania called Ponovich. Ponovich, the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, their name should be obliterated forever. There wasn't one survivor in Ponovich. Every member of that community was murdered. Men, women, and children. And there were over 10,000 people in that community. Not one survivor. The Ponovich Rav, he was the chief rabbi of Ponovich. Why wasn't he killed? Because years earlier, his oldest son was conscripted into the Russian draft. And if a Jew would go into the army, besides the anti-Semitism, you cannot survive as a Jew. Because if you would show any of your Jewishness, you couldn't survive. So his son, he sent his son to Eretz Yisrael. We're talking right now in the late 20s to evade the draft. So right before the war broke out, he didn't see his son for many years. He went to visit his son in Israel. In those days, they called it Palestine. And after he was there, the borders shut down, and all the members of his community were trapped. And every member of his family had a family, about 8, 9 children. The son who was in Israel was the only one who survived. Everybody else was murdered. His wife and all his children were killed. So Ponovich Rav was one of the closest students of the Chofetz Chaim, and he was a genius. He was a financial genius, besides being a tremendous Talmud Chacham. And after the war, what was the first thing he did? He had to rebuild. So he went to Bnei Brak, Bnei Brak in those years were sand dunes. And he says he's going to rebuild. And there's a yeshiva in Bnei Brak called the Ponovich Yeshiva. The reason why it's called Ponovich was he was the chief rabbi of Ponovich, and he built that yeshiva. And many of the refugees, teenagers, young children who came from Europe who survived, he built elementary schools, high schools, orphanages in Bnei Brak to accommodate all these children, boys and girls. And each one had another name. It was called, but the Avos, for the younger ones, it was the equivalent of providing parentage for them. And he went with somebody giving him a tour of the properties that he can buy. So he says to the people take him around, he says, here I'm going to build the yeshiva on that hill with all the sand dunes. And here I'm going to build the Beis Yaakov, the girls' school. And here I'm going to build the orphanage. And here I'm going to build this. So they say, Rabbi, you're dreaming. You're going to create this entity, which is unheard of. You're dreaming. So the Ponovich answered, most people dream when they sleep. I dream when I'm awake. That was his response. Alan, how do you like that response? And he did it. It's, the hashkocha, the way Hashem works it. How did the Ponovich Rav finance his community when it was in Lithuania? South Africa, Johannesburg, Cape Town, all these communities are mostly comprised of Lithuanian Jews. And Lithuanian Jews were very proud of their so-called the pedigree, where they came from. So when the Ponovich Rav started to go to Johannesburg in the 20s, in the 1920s, and they were very wealthy, the Jews. In those years, the Jews, it was like the Ivory Coast. You could literally pick up gold nuggets in the street. It was a backward, primitive country, and one of the main industries was feathers for women's hats. They had these exotic birds, and they used the feathers, besides ivory, everything else. So the Jews there, although the Boers were there, the Jews were very wealthy. When he came, he would spend a few weeks there. It was like Mashiach arrived. The chief rabbi, he spoke Lithuanian Yiddish. The personality was Lithuanian. This was their, their crown jewel. He raised tremendous amounts of money. And he brought that money back, and he supported the community in Lithuania, Ponovich. After the war, South Africa wasn't touched by the war. As a result of the war, the Jews in South Africa heard that and many of them, like David Lubel's grandmother, came from Ponovich. After the war, when they heard everything was destroyed, and the Ponovich Rav being in Israel, and the Ponovich Rav wants to rebuild Ponovich in Israel. So he traveled to South Africa. They were there waiting for him. And they opened their pocketbooks, and whatever he needed financially, they provided for him. But so the funds, the financial funding for Ponovich came from the South African Jewry. That's how it came about. Even though they were not observant, they were traditional. They were proud to be Jewish. There was a Jewishness. They spoke Yiddish. They would go to shul on Shabbos, but they were ignorant. But still, all the Torah that happened in Bnei Brak was due to their philanthropy, because they valued what the Ponovich Rav stood for. Not fully understanding what he was doesn't make a difference. And there were some observant Jews there, but the vast majority was not observant. Lee thinks Hashem already orchestrated it, that in the early 20s, Ponovich Rav went there. And he had this credibility with them. And that was their pride. That was the crown jewel. And ultimately, Torah survived and was rebuilt in Israel due to what? That he went there in the early 20s to create all these relationships. So Hashem orchestrates everything, puts everything in place that when it's ready to happen, it's going to happen. we find that among Hasidim have a Rebbe. They have a Hasidic rabbi. The Rebbe among Hasidim is like the prince. And people provide for his even material needs. They don't have, the Rebbe takes priority over their own personal needs, financially, every sense of the word. Rav Steinman once said to me, he saw something which he never saw in his life. He was invited to the Ger Rebbe's grandchild's wedding, and he said, he shared it with me. He says, I saw something I never saw before. That the Hasidim rejoiced more at the wedding of the Rebbe's grandchild than at their own children's weddings. Could you imagine? This was their pride and joy. This was everything. So to provide for the Rebbe, to rejoice with the Rebbe. So what the Rebbe's to the Hasidim, that is what the Panovich was to the South African Jews, to South African Jewry. He was their crown jewel. But you need a source for that. You need tremendous merit. To see it correctly, it makes sense. That's what we're all about. That's the basis for our eternity. Our eternity is Torah. That we're not observant doesn't make it, but that's our eternity. I used to say many years ago, no, you have Orthodox Jews, conservative Jews, Reform Jews. So a person doesn't observe Shabbos, doesn't even keep dietary laws. But when he goes to keep his yard sale, he goes to an Orthodox shul. So I said, why do you go to an Orthodox shul? Because he says, you know why? Because what I do personally at my personal level is one thing. But I know that's the real thing. That's a rabbi. In the Reformed temple, I'm not sure what it is. It has no semblance of what Judaism is all about. And the recreated religion, whatever they created there. So when I want to be involved with Judaism, I know where to go. Because the rabbi, the Orthodox shul, he is the real thing. It's the same idea. Years ago, if you read, it's worthwhile to read the book for the 25th yard site of Moshe Feinstein. Art School put out a book, a biography on him. They put out a biography when he first passed away, but it was done very quickly. It didn't do what it should have done to really understand Rav Moshe Feinstein. For the 25th anniversary, he put out something very special. And over there's a story. There was a man, Rav Moshe Reddy, wasn't well. And every year they would have a dinner to raise money for his yeshiva, which was on the Lower East Side. It was called Tferes Yeshalayim. And Rav Moshe, after everybody was seated in their seats, Rav Moshe Feinstein would walk in. Everybody would rise, and showing true Kavod Torah, honoring Torah for what it was. And Rav Moshe Feinstein was an embodiment of Torah, leading one of the leading Torah sages in the world, the posek of the world. That's who he was. So there was a Jew, not an observant Jew, an older man, probably the same age as Rav Moshe. And he was willing to give the yeshiva in those days, of going back 50 years ago, $40,000 to have the schus, to have the honor to walk Rav Moshe Feinstein into the banquet hall when everybody stands. He wanted to have that schus, to be associated with Rav Moshe Feinstein. If you would have said, if Rav Moshe Feinstein has that value, you wouldn't pay $40,000. So why don't you observe Judaism as you should? Two separate things. I know what it's about. It's easier to give $40,000 to acknowledge what that is. But for me to live my life and every day make choices and give up, it's too difficult. So on a personal level, he wasn't observant. But in terms of esteeming and revering the real thing, that is willing to pay $40,000. During the war, at the beginning of the war, there was a certain Hungarian Jew who escaped from a labor battalion. The Nazis, they conscript people into labor battalions. They very often didn't come back. And he fled to Munkac. He tells the Minchas Aldoza what's going on. And they had some of the concentration camps in Poland that were killing Jews. And he says to the Munkac, he says, how many Jews does Hashem have to take for Kiddush Hashem? enough. So the Mukat Shurav said to him, this Minchas Alosa said to him, Hashem, the Kiddush Hashem is not only dying for God. The main Kiddush Hashem is to live for God. That every day you make a sacrifice. You can do what you want or you do what he wants. That's the Kiddush Hashem wants.
That's what I was going to ask. That was my point. Okay.
But that's the point he made.
Because also,
every day you have a challenge, and you go in either direction you want. And despite your direction, you choose Hashem's direction.
Because you said many times. You said many times, like when you're saying Shema, the first.
Makes you a point. When a person dies, the moment he dies, it's over. It's one moment.
Right.
To live with Kiddush Hashem, every moment of your existence, you have to stand up to that challenge. It's not simple. And the Seforno in his commentary, when he says "V'chol nafshecha," with all your soul, he says it also means "V'chol tavosno," all your desires. That you have to willing to forego your desires for the sake. Your love for Hashem should surpass all your desires. That's first and foremost. That's the priority, which is not easy. There's no Rechaim HaKodesh in this week's parsha we just read. In Emor, it's all based on Kabbalah, Zohars, many things. And if you read through that and understand the makeup of the Jew, the spiritual makeup, and the objective and the potential, what we're able to accomplish, it's not to be believed. But even you know what you meant to accomplish, and you understand what the result of that is. Most people only understand, aren't even aware what he writes there. But even if you're aware, there's still challenges. We still have an evil inclination. I'll just give you a little semblance of what he speaks about. We discussed many times that a Jew is made up of a number of components. We have a nefesh. The nefesh is the basis for our physical existence. Then we have a spirit. It's called ruach. Then we have a neshama. We have a soul. The ruach, the nefesh, is something which has relevance, total relevance to the physical, our physical function. The spirit is something which is between spiritual and physical. You're able to speak. The human being speaks because he has a spirit. Neshama is the soul, which is totally spiritual. But that soul exists within this world to give the person relevance to spirituality. Then you have the neshama of the neshama. That neshama, it's like a chain link. The neshama that is relative is linked to a neshama in the spiritual world. And that neshama in the spiritual world is linked to Hashem. He's the root of everything. That is the reality of every Jew. You have this linkage. Nefesh, Ruach, neshama, the neshama of the neshama, and then Hashem on top of the ladder. And you have these energies released continuously, which ultimately filters down to the nefesh, and that's the function of the person. So he explains, what is the objective of a Jew? Hashem gives us mitzvos. The mitzvos and Torah is to spiritualize ourselves. And you're able to spiritualize yourself, to take the neshama, which is relatively the most mundane of all the components, and elevate it to the level of ruach, of spirit. And you're able to elevate the spirit to the level of neshama. And you're able to elevate the neshama to the level of the neshama which exists outside of this existence. And it's all upgrading everything. And that's the objective of life. If you meet these challenges, but if you, he writes over there, he quotes Zohars continuously. It's all rooted in the Zohar. If you do this, what you're worthy of at the end of your life, and even while you live, the way Hashem values your existence, you become like a spiritual being. In the physical world, you function and you're subject not to the natural forces of existence. You're able to supersede them because you've upgraded in all these various levels. if you would understand that, and you have an appreciation, and with your personal beliefs, you wouldn't waste a minute with anything but this. But yet, we all whittle away the time. And we let all this time just fall between the cracks. At the end of the day, no, I think I studied half an hour, it's enough, an hour is enough. But every moment has infinite preciousness. It's eternity. And the different levels of eternity. And that's why I always quote the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva. Every Jew has the ability to be as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. How's it possible? The answer, what was Moshe Rabbeinu's accomplishment? Whatever his potential was, he fulfilled that potential. Every one of us has a potential to be able to upgrade within our own potential. So if you upgrade within your own potential, you know less than Moshe Rabbeinu. Of course, God doesn't expect you to be more than you're meant to be. So since our potentials within a infinitesimal compared to Moshe Rabbeinu, but if you accomplish that, you're no less than worthy than Moshe Rabbeinu himself. That's the understanding. Divrei Torah tzrichen chizuk. The words of Torah need continuous upshoring. That's why environment is so important. That the environment should be conducive to what we're meant to be. I say l'chorav. You have a teacher. I say l'chover. All these various pieces of the puzzle contribute to keep that focus. And to keep you going. Rashi explains in Brachos, a person is trained in martial arts, in battle. If you don't practice continuously, you get out of shape. And your reflexes are not the same. So to be able to respond to the attack, and if you don't respond properly to the attack, it could cost you your life.
You want to say hello to the rabbi?
The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, we're always continuously under attack. We're always under attack. You need Divrei Torah, that's our shield. That shields us from that. That gives us that clarity. So if you're not really adept and really where you should be, and your reflexes are not right, you may miss, and you may not respond. If you don't respond, then you're vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable, then you get hurt. That's the concept. It says that the men of the High Assembly, they offered the Shemona Esrei. And among the group, there were there were three prophets, and he goes to explain that they chose words which activate forces that any conceivable need we should have till the end of time is embedded in the words of the Amidah, of the Shemona Esrei. And he says the Kisvi Arizal, the elucidations of the Arizal, is not a tipa shebiyam. It's not even the equivalent of a drop in the ocean in terms of what's contained in the Amidah. You understand? In the Amidah, the Zohar, Rav Shimon, that is the concealed Torah. What these Nevi'im knew, what Anshe Knesset knew, they knew all this. They knew all the inner workings of existence. A Navi, of course, is greater.
I see. Okay.
That's the understanding. Okay, we're going to stop here. You have some other question to ask. Now writes that when you learn Shas, let's see, the first Mishnah in Kedushin says you can marry a woman one of three ways. Kesef, money. Gives a woman something of value in marriage, she accepts it, she's married. Of course, you have to have witnesses, whatever. So the Gemara says, Kesef minayin. What is this? What is the basis for giving something of money? And the Gemara goes and explains what the source is. Meaning, that you could marry a woman with kesef, with giving something out, that's Masorah. What is the learning of Torah? To connect the oral law with the written law. Exactly how is it extrapolated from the written law? Because throughout Shas, it always says the halacha, and what's the source? At Sinai was Torah Sheba'al Peh. You had the Torah and Torah Sheba'al Peh. We had the 13 methodologies to extrapolate it from the Torah. That's what we had. Now you got to put it all together. So it wasn't the question what the halacha is. The halacha, we know what the halacha is. Now we have to join it all together to show exactly how the oral law is extrapolated from written law. Okay.
Okay, shkoyach.
Okay. We'll see you tomorrow. And Daf Yomi